guys give it up for the band real quick? Let's show them a little gratitude. Come on. I mean, the reality is they bring us to the throne room of our King of Kings and Lord of Lords, that we can express just how great he is, right? And they do that every week, and they do such a great job. And we are in our last week of this series called March Mayhem. And it's kind of gone along with the March Madness time of year. Anyone your team is doing good? Anyone your team is just in mayhem? Get it, mayhem? Oh, you see how, I don't know what I'm doing with that. But I will say, man, there have been a lot of upsets early on, and that's kind of what this series has been all about, comebacks, right? March Mayhem is right. March Mayhem is a series that is all about how a setback is a setup for a comeback. And this week, man, there were some huge upsets if you were watching any of the games. It's funny how I mean, that game was incredible. In the last minutes of the game, they come back, they tie it up, and go into overtime and win the game. And man, life so often, especially in the Bible, time and time again, you would see these great setbacks, these moments where everything seemed like it was all over, and then God would use those moments as a setup for a great comeback in that person's life, or in the nation of Israel's life, God's chosen people's life, or for us in our life, right? That's what the gospel is all about. A setback is a setback, and often as a setup, and oftentimes God will use that setback as a setup for a great comeback in our lives, that He can use that in the lives of those around us, right? But it's in the setback moments that oftentimes it feels like it's all over. Some of us tonight, man, you feel like you're kind of in the mayhem of life. You feel so broken. You feel like life is overwhelming you, is beating you up. But I want to tell you, it's not over. It's not over, and I can prove that to you real quick. I want you to take your fingers and do this with me real quick. Do that with me. I want you to pinch yourself real quick. You feel that? It's proof. It's not over. The very fact that you're in this room tonight tells me that God is not done with you tonight. No matter how messed up, how much of a setback you feel like you may be in tonight. But I will say, it's in those setback moments of life that often we feel like it's all over. And for so many people, man, we kind of live life that way. Like the question, is the glass half empty or is it half full? Well, what do you think? Is it half empty? Who would say it's half empty? All right. Who would say it's half full? Man, great philosophers obviously in this room. It's so terrifying to live life as if the glass is half empty. Man, we don't want to live in the misery, but so often we can't see past the hurt. We can't see past the pain. And it's in those moments that we feel like it's all over. I remember being a 7th grader and going to my youth group for the very first time. You remember the first time you showed up to youth group? Those can be awkward moments for some of us. So I was a 7th grader. That's when we promoted into youth group. I had a sister that was 6 years older than me, so she had already graduated from high school. She had graduated out of the youth ministry. But for 6 years, I heard about all the fun that she had in youth group, the mission trips, the camps, the great friend moments, all these great things. Day after day, week after week, year after year, she would talk about it, and I could not wait to get into student ministry. And my day had come. My mom dropped me off, those great awkward moments where mom drops you off. And I walked into our church building, and I walked through the gymnasium, and I walked to where the stairs were, went up to the stairs where the children's ministry rooms were. I'd graduated that area, and now it's time for me to go up to the 3rd floor of our building, and I was finally going to get to walk in to the youth group, and I knew that I was going to walk in there, and I was going to make all these great friends, and the next 6 years of my life were going to be awesome, and I could not wait for that moment. And I opened the door, and I walked in, and no one talked to me. It was just so awkward. I was seventh grade, awkward. Matt Boone, you were all in middle school at one point. It could be awkward. And that moment for me was so awkward. The first few minutes went by, and I would kind of walk over by people and stand there hoping that they would say something to me. And they wouldn't. And eventually, I just went and found a chair and sat down. And after 15, 20 minutes of music and someone talking for another 15 or 20 minutes, it was finally over, and I just wanted to leave and never, ever, ever, ever come back. Can I tell you, if you're here for the first time and your experience has been anywhere near that, come find me. I want you to know I am glad you're here. Is anyone else glad that we have first-timers tonight? We love our first-timers. We love our first-timers. I wish somebody had just loved little Matt Boone that night. You know what I'm saying? It's hurtful. I'm still going to therapy over it. I'll tell you what messes us up, I think, the most in our life, and I think it affects us spiritually so much. I think it's false expectations. I think that could mess you up relationally, but I think it messes us up spiritually. I really think it messes up the hope that we have in our God, those faulty expectations. Have you ever had those moments? Maybe you tried out for football or baseball or dance, because check that out. You tried out. I know. Oh, there's more to come. But it just didn't go the way that you thought it would. Maybe you thought that this special girl or special guy was just going to swoop in and you're going to live happily ever after, and it just didn't happen. And faulty expectations, false expectations, man, they leave us broken. They leave us hurt. They can leave us devastated. They can leave us devastated in life. I think what false expectations in life lead to is that life just isn't fair kind of mentality that we can get entrapped in. And by the way, if you don't know this, something that you need to learn in life is that life isn't fair. Just know that. That will get you started on the right foot in life. Life just isn't fair, and that's okay. If you're aware of that and you can move on, it will help you out in life. But sometimes we live in that I'm upset, faulty expectation that life's not fair. And what it develops into is self-entitlement. Like, I deserve to be on that football team. I deserve to get an A on that test. I deserve to be swept off my feet. I deserve to become a great dancer. I'm sorry. I deserve for somebody to talk to me in that student ministry. I deserve that. That attitude can mess us up. It can lead to some very disappointing moments. It can lead to pain. But you know, one thing that I've learned in life is that there's purpose in pain. You ever thought about that? You ever thought about how great pain actually is? Maddie just broke his ankle tonight. There's purpose in pain, Maddie. That's right. I want you to think about this. Just physically, let's think about it real quick. Have you ever, hopefully you haven't done this, but if you have ever put your hand in fire, what would be your experience? You get burnt. It would be pain, right? Let me ask you this. Can there possibly be purpose in that pain? Yeah, what is the purpose in that pain? Don't do it again. Keep your hand out of the fire, right? How many painful moments in our lives have we just not learned from? So a couple of weeks ago, I started talking about Joshua, right? This great comeback story. We looked at Joshua chapter 1 where Moses had died and God had deemed Joshua as the one who would lead God's chosen people into the promised land. But the setback happened 40 years earlier, right? I want to go back to those 40 years earlier one more time. This time we're not going to be in chapter 13. Chapter 13 was when Moses sent the spies into Israel to check out things. 2 of the spies came back and said, it's dangerous. 2 of them came back and said, it is amazing. Joshua is one of those two. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up to Numbers chapter 14. I want to go back. I skipped over something that I think is important. Going back to there's purpose in the pain. It reminds me a lot of Romans chapter 12, right? I'm sorry, Romans chapter 8, verses 28. Where it says, and we know that in all things God works for the good, in all things, in the painful things, right? That God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. All right, Joshua. We've gone back 40 years. We know that it's a great comeback story. We know that. But I want to go back to the setback, and I want you to begin to see the set up tonight. I think it's something that God has set us aside to learn tonight about ourselves that can either set us up for success in having hope in God and God working not just in our present but also in our future, or it can set us up for failure where we begin to practice not trusting God, not believing that God has a plan in our future in our life. So verse 14, two different people that I want us to focus on, Joshua and pretty much the rest of Israel. Then all the congregation raised out a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in the wilderness. In other words, Moses, why didn't you just leave us in Egypt to die? Moses, why wouldn't you have just let us stay here in the wilderness to die? And then they go on and they say, why is this Lord bringing us into this land just to fall by the sword? In other words, it's not fair. It's not fair. The Israelites are throwing this pity party. It's not fair. It's self-entitlement, right? We deserve better than this, God. It's a dangerous place for us to get stuck in life where we begin to believe that our expectation of what life should be for us is better than God's plan for us. It just sets us up for failure. It's that false expectation. Now, I want us to compare the Israelites to this different attitude that Joshua has. It's an attitude of gratitude. And it says, and Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, they tear their clothes, and they said to the congregation, to the Israelites, to the people of Israel, the land which we passed through, that we passed through to spy it out, is an exceedingly good land. They said, guys, it's better than we thought it would be. How interesting that 10 of the spies who went in said it's not good enough, we deserve better. But 2 of them came out saying, man, what God has for us is so much better than we could have ever dreamed. How much of our life do we spend saying, man, it's just not fair? God, I deserve better than this. God, if only I could date this person. Right? Let's be honest about that. You know what I'm saying? We struggle with that. We all do. If only, God, I could marry this person, my life would be perfect. God, if only I could make the football team. If only I could dance. It's a lifelong dream of mine. If only. But I want you to see it real quick. If we live a life of believing that our expectations are better than God's plans and purposes, it will begin to deteriorate any kind of hope that we can have. Because here's what happens to our expectations in life. They fall flat and they leave us disappointed. How much of our lives will we believe that the glass is half empty? The bottle, it's a bottle. The bottle's half empty. Whoa! I almost lost my notes. Two things that I want us to be aware of that I think leads us to losing hope in God. And it happens through self-entitlement. The first one is a spiritual nearsightedness. It's spiritual nearsightedness. You know what nearsighted is? It means that you can see things that are near to your face, but everything beyond that is blurry. Anyone in here, you're nearsighted? All right. Now, so you know what it's like. Now, I want you to take that thought, and I want you to compare it to your spiritual life. To your life. We become spiritually nearsighted. All we can focus on are the things that aren't going right in our lives. How much of our lives do we focus on the wrong, the bad, that it could be better? God, what if you? God, did you mess this up? And honestly, so much of us don't even go that far. We're just frustrated with life, and we even leave God out of it. It's spiritual myopia. What would happen if we took a step back and we just looked around our life and began to focus not on the bad, but on all the good that God has brought into our life? I want you to think about that for just a second. What are the good things that God has brought into your life? I'm guessing you have a slew of people around you that love the junk out of you. A mom, a dad, brother, sister, friends. My guess is you are brilliant at something because God wired us all differently to be great at certain things. We could probably go on and on about all the good things that God has put in our life if we would stop focusing on the negatives. The second thing that self-entitlement causes is spiritual amnesia. How many great things has God done in our past that we've forgotten about? And as we look at our present and in our future, we're very leery of trusting God. We're very unsure about it. We're terrified of the giants that are before us, the things that will mess us up, the disappointments that we may face. But we forgot how God has brought us through the giants of our past. Spiritual myopia, spiritual amnesia. It's what the Israelites were struggling with. If you went on in verse 11, it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me, and how long will they not believe in me in spite of all the signs that I have done among them?" You see, it's spiritual myopia or nearsightedness, spiritual amnesia. But it's not over. But it's not over, right? God wasn't done with the Israelites. God had a plan. Now, that plan was going to unfold for them 40 years into the future, but it's not over. God's not done with the Israelites in chapter 14. And I want you to know that the theme of tonight is it's not over. Will you say that with me? It's not over. Say it one more time. It's not over. One more time louder. It's not over. 3 more times. I'm just kidding. I get excited sometimes. It's not over. Stephen Furtick, a pastor at Elevation Church, said gratitude begins where our sense of entitlement ends. I think it's gratitude that sets Joshua up to endure the 40 years that he would endure before he would get to lead God's chosen people into the promised land. Joshua carried this attitude of gratitude. What about you? What can you tonight begin to think about when it comes to being grateful to God for who you are and what you have? My guess, if we began to sit here and write it all out, we could write all night long and just keep on writing because God has been so good to us. You see, it's this. We don't want what we deserve. We think we do. That's self-entitlement. We don't want what we deserve. Because what we deserve is hell. We don't want what we deserve. That's what's fair. What's fair for us is death. Jesus made things very unfair when it came to the cross. It's the greatest picture is the cross when it comes to a setback as a setup for a comeback. It's the great story of the comeback for humanity. We don't want what's fair. We want what is good. And God is good. What can you be grateful for? When it came to Joshua, Joshua had this attitude of gratitude. Joshua was grateful to God, right? The rest of Israel wasn't. The rest of Israel was ticked that the promised land was full of giants who would kill them. And Joshua said, they're bread to us. We can eat them. The things that are standing between you and God's promised land for you, if you'll trust in God, you're going to eat those things for lunch. God's got you. Joshua was grateful to God. Joshua was grateful to Moses. When everyone else was ticked at Moses, Joshua had Moses' back. Throughout those 40 years, everyone could have looked at Moses and said, you're a failure. You couldn't even get us into the promised land. But Joshua would sit under the leadership from Moses for 40 years and learn how to lead a nation. Joshua was grateful to Caleb for godly friends. One of the greatest things about Exit 7, midweek worship for teenagers, is this. You get to gather together with other people who love Jesus Christ. You get to rub elbows with them. You get to worship and praise our King of Kings. You get to be reminded that we're in this together. And even though we feel like we're in a setback, God's using this as a setup for a great comeback, even for our tomorrow. It's not over. It's not over. Joshua was grateful for the promised land. That was God's plan. Joshua was grateful for God's law. That's God's word. That's our spiritual GPS. Joshua lived this attitude of gratitude. And I wonder, what about us? What would it take for us to be grateful for our today? That God has given us the very air in our lungs. What would it take? So I just do stupid things, right? I was a seventh grader. Even as a seventh grader, I did stupid things. I went to youth group. Nobody talked to me. I never wanted to go back to church again. So I'm leaving. I walk down the stairs. I pass the children's ministry area. I'm like, I'm never going back there because I graduated that. And I walk down the stairs. And I walk into the gymnasium. And this 18-year-old student, the senior student, he says, hey, isn't your name Matt? And I was like, yes, please don't talk to me. I'm feeling really weird right now. They're playing basketball, and he stops the game, and he says, aren't you Chandler's little brother? And I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, you want to play some basketball with me? You want to play some basketball with us? And I was like, no, I'm literally the world's worst basketball player on the planet. And as a seventh grader, it was such this awkward moment. And Fred grabbed the ball, and he threw it to me. He said, shoot. And I shot, and I missed. And he rebounded it, he threw it back to me, and I shot again, and I missed. And he rebounded it, he threw it back to me again, and I shot, and I missed. And he threw it to me again, and I shot. And I don't know how many times I missed it, but I finally made it. And he celebrated me, and then we played for a little bit more. And my mom walked through the door to pick me up. And he said, hey, Matt, why don't you go to Taco Casa with me? Or with us. That's like going to Taco Bell. And I was like, okay. Yeah, because I was a seventh grader. And I would spend the next 7 years falling in love with Jesus. Because this 12th grader saw this little nerdy 7th grader, and he wanted to hang out with me. Listen, we have all kinds of setbacks that are coming our way. They just are. Life's not fair, but God is good. tonight as we finish up, Brando's going to come up here. We're going to sing this last song, but I want us to do more than sing it. I want us to take a couple of moments, minutes in other words, because that's all we have. But I want us to take a couple of minutes, and I want us to spend the first minute saying thank you to God for as many things as you can be thankful to God for right now. That's going to be your starting point for the rest of this week, and I hope for the rest of your life. Practice saying thank you often and daily. It will change you. Thank you to God. Thank you to God. God, thank you for. God, thank you for my mom. God, thank you for my dad. God, thank you for my brother. God, thank you for your love. God, thank you for the cross. God, thank you. God, thank you. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Thank you. Thank you. I want you to take the next minute, and I want you to be thankful for God. I want you to take the second minute, and listen to this. God ain't done, right? In verse 12, God says some things, and it sounds like maybe he is done, like he's ticked. He says, I'm going to strike them with pestilence and disinherit them. That sounds like he's done. I don't want to tick God off. But then he says this, and I will make you a nation greater and mightier than they. Students, I want you to hear this from me. This is your student ministry. Student ministry isn't a program. It's a ministry of students. God's not done with you. In your second minute of prayers we're finishing up tonight, I want you to begin to thank God for what he's going to do in and through your life in this student ministry in the next days, weeks, for some of you, months and years and years and years. I believe God is going to use you to change this city. I believe that. I've been praying for that for weeks. I've only been praying that for you for weeks because I've only known you for weeks. But I'm going to keep praying that for us because I think God has big plans for you. I don't think you're the future leaders of this church. I think you can be leaders in this church right now. Let me pray for us.